Ken Rosenthal reporting the Mariners expected to fire Scott Servais. They will name Dan Wilson as manager. Rosenthal writes, the Seattle Mariners' stunning collapse has prompted a change in leadership, with the club expected to replace manager Scott Servais with Dan Wilson. Sources briefed on the Mariners' plans told The Athletic. Ken Rosenthal adds that the official announcement is expected today. There has been no official announcement. I need to make that clear. I'm not announcing the Mariners have said something. I will tell you the second that happens. This is a report from Ken Rosenthal that the Mariners are expected to fire Scott Servais and name Dan Wilson as manager. Bump. Obviously, we are reacting to this in real time. Is this the right move?
It could be. I don't know. I would have kept Servais and let it just ride out. But the pressure that this organization is getting from the outsiders, right, I think influence this. And then the pressure from inside as well. I'm sure there are people in the ownership group that are saying, do something. Something needs to be done. We were 10 games ahead of the Astros June 19th, and look where we are now. We cannot continue down this path, salvage anything from this season. And Dan's been around for a while, right? He's in the Mariners Hall of Fame. He was a catcher all the way up in 2005. He's been a minor league defensive coordinator, a catching instructor, special assistant, player development, TV broadcaster. He's been around this team. He's been around this game, obviously, for a long time. You guys who love the Mariners know this guy. Honestly, I expected them to put Acta in there or somebody if they were to get rid of Servais. But this is the angle. Is it the right move? I don't know. These guys got to do what they think is right for them. Me personally, I would have just rolled it out with Servais and took all the criticism and said, it is what it is for this year. Let's see if Servais can connect with these guys because these are his guys. I
feel the same way. I probably would have. It's the same reason, obviously, last year's Seahawks season was lost, and I don't think that they should have fired Pete Carroll mid-season. I think there's a certain point where you just say, let them finish this out and see what's going to happen. They've at least earned that much. And I know that there are people that already disagree with that. What I will acknowledge is that failure leads to consequence and accountability. Bump, you know this. You have, this is so patronizing, but you have kids. You know that there are certain points when it's this is something we learn from a young age, that whether or not it feels fair, whether or not you like it, that failing means a change will come. And in sports, and you also know this, in sports with head coaches, everyone kind of gets fired. Everyone sees their tenure end with being fired. It is rare you get to ride off into the sunset because sometimes a change is just needed. Do I think a change was needed right now? I don't know. Maybe a change provides a spark. I don't think Scott Servais is the biggest problem with this team. I think that there is a big systemic issue that will only be solved with some self-reflection.
Well, here's the thing. Something needed to be done. And you're not going to bring up a player from the minors. You're not going to grab a player who's sitting on the couch at home. The trade deadline is gone.
Yep.
Something needed to be done. The ownership group ain't going to step down and say, we're selling the team. DePoto's not going to fire himself, or the owners aren't going to fire DePoto. This was really the only move that could be made that would be drastic enough to at least show the fans that we're not giving up and we're disappointed in what's going down, and someone needs to be held accountable. I think you and I knew that if there was a move to be made, this was probably going to be the one, even if Servais was put in such a horrible position that he had no control over. He does have control over certain things. We talked about the role that he plays on this team earlier in the show. But, yeah, we knew that if something were to go down, it was going to be our man Scott.
A delicate situation now for Dan Wilson, who reportedly will take over as at least interim manager. We'll see if that's a long-term thing. I've asked you a similar question when it's been Servais, but if you're Dan Wilson, this is a delicate situation to inherit, though you are still in a playoff race. What's your messaging to your players?
Guys, we're still in this thing.
You have to, right?
We're still in it, and hopefully, look, I'm not here to save the day. It's going to be up to you guys. Just something needed to change, and I'm that change. But this is still your team.
Yeah.
It's your team. I'm putting it on the players because who knows how long Dan Wilson's going to be here. Maybe they go on a run, they make the playoffs, and he's a hero, and you sign him to a long deal. But Dan's got to come in and put the ownership on the players and say, I'm just a new voice in the dugout. Y'all got to go out there and still play some ball.
Okay, I did get called out by listeners.
What's that?
Joe in Bellevue, did you just say Bump knows failure better than anyone? No. I didn't. No, I didn't.
It didn't feel like you missed
okay,
that way.
Thank you. What I mean is that not only have you been around old school coaching and prefer old school coaching, but you've been in sports your whole life, and you have seen former head coaches get fired, and you have seen, you know what I mean? And you might have had a great experience with them, or you might have had a good season, but that's the reality of sports.
Yeah. You hardly go out crossing up Brian Russell at the free throw line and hitting the game winner like Jordan did in 98. Like, you hardly go out like that. Typically, the league tells you, or a team tells you, you're no longer good enough to rock with us, so we're going to let you go.
Oh, a really good question from Wally in Snoqualmie. Again, if you're just now joining us, Ken Rosenthal is reporting the Mariners are expected to fire Scott Servais, with Dan Wilson taking over as manager, with that news expected today. This has not been confirmed by the Mariners. We will tell you the second it is, if it is. Wally in Snoqualmie says, great follow-up question. How desirable is the Mariners' job?
Here's the thing. If you go ahead and get a guy who is hungry just to get into the business of being a manager, then it's extremely desirable, and ownership is going to be able to manipulate that person the way they have when it comes to budgeting and all that stuff. If you really want to win, you go out and get a guy who's done this before, but that guy's going to come to the table and say, we can't just keep doing the same things. Like, why is this job desirable? You tell me. In the movie Step Brothers, where they reverse interview, we're going to reverse interview. Let's try this exercise, okay? Like, why do I want this job if I'm going to be put in the same position that Service has been put in for the last, 7-8 years, and not feel like I'm supported and can go out and get the players that we need to make this a championship caliber team? So I think it's extremely desirable for the guy who's just trying to crack the code, who's trying to get in. But for the guy who has experience, a guy who's won, a guy who's been around the block a few times, he's looking at this job and saying, yeah, I would love to coach this rotation. It's crazy. Julio, crazy potential. But I see the way y'all been moving. That's not championship type moves.